Okay, we'll get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Kathy Sheffers, and I'm on the marketing team at Goodheart-Willcox. I'm joined by my colleague, Erin Brennan, who is the GW Acquisitions Editor for our transportation product line, and she is responsible for acquiring subject matter experts to author our growing line of instructional resources. Well, she hit the jackpot with our ADAS author team, and we are thrilled to have Scott Brown, Steve Zach, and Kurt Shadbolt with us today. Today's agenda includes some quick introductions and an overview of the new ADAS resources. So many of you provided great questions on your registration forms, and our authors will be addressing these questions throughout the session. Many of you asked how to get started with ADAS and how to integrate it into your curriculum, which we will cover throughout the webinar. You can also enter additional questions during today's webinar in the chat box, and we'll review those at the end of the session. Finally, we'll provide some next steps regarding samples, quotes, and handouts that will be available to you. And just know that this webinar is being recorded, and you will receive the full recording in the next 24 hours. So I'm happy to have Erin start out by introducing our three ADAS authors.
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks to our amazing ADAS authors for being here, and all of you webinar attendees. We're so appreciative of your time. Now, all three of these gentlemen have their bios, their official bios, posted to our website, and certainly connect with them on LinkedIn. But I wanted to share the story of this amazing ADAS dream team. So back in summer of 2021, Kurt reached out to me, and I've been a longtime fan of Kurt's. He's an educator out of Chabot College, and he said, "Hey, Erin, do you know Steve Zach?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm familiar with him. I've heard of his name. I know he's epic. He's iconic. I know he spent several decades in the industry." And he said, "Yeah, Steve has worked with cutting edge technologies, serving as a technical trainer in industry. He holds several patents. We just invited him out to California to meet with the instructors here to do a train the trainer event surrounding ADAS. And he gave us some great resources, but we need more. You have to talk to Steve. We have to get him to author." So Steve and I got talking about the opportunity and got to know each other better, and we're excited. And we know that ADAS is all that industry talks about. Our industry talks about it a lot. So, but we knew that there'd be great benefit in creating a resource that also included input from an educator. So somebody to ensure that we were doing right by those academic programs that are training the future technicians of the industry. We knew we needed to get Kurt back involved in the conversation, and Kurt came along, so thanks to Kurt. But that same event, that summer of 2021, there was another industry icon that was speaking and training, a shop owner and technician that has been asked to speak at a number of industry events. And I know I've sat in the audience at SEMA when he's addressed an international crowd talking about these technologies. We know that this shop owner and technician is engaging with these technologies every day, and he's also at the center of technician and manufacturer conversations because he's the creator of Diagnostic Network. So we knew that we needed to build this ADAS dream team with Kurt and Steve and Scott to deliver this ADAS training resource for education and for industry. So thanks to the authors for building this product and also participating in the webinar.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. So just to give you a little background, the Advanced Driver Assistance Systems is the first standalone ADAS-specific resource designed for transportation education. It's available in print and online options for you and your students, and it provides a complete solution for you. We will be highlighting the components you see across the bottom of your screen today, including the ebook, a digital companion, job sheets, a video library, a slew of instructor resources, an image library, and a virtual toolbox. But before we go on, I'd like to, Scott, if you can start off and tell us why you all created this great resource besides Erin, chatting with you, but the need for this product and why you all felt compelled to take on this task.
Sure. Thank you for the introductions. Yeah, I'm in this in-service market, right? And so this ADAS stuff has been coming into our marketplace, and we've really had no formal education on the subject. We've kind of been baptized by fire. And I about 6 years ago started really diving in deep. Going back 10 years ago, I had a level 0 car. I started taking some stuff apart, trying to figure out, hey, where's this stuff come from? Who makes it? And it's just continued to snowball from there. And I met Kurt several years ago at another event, and he was speaking on ADAS, so I connected with him. And then since then, we've started, doing a lot of these education pieces for schools and instructors. And Kurt asked me, he said, "Hey, do you know Erin Brennan?" I go, "I know Erin. I've known her forever. She's great." He goes, "Well, she's thinking about commissioning us to do this book." And I said, "Yeah, let me in. I want to be part of this. I'm not an educator, but I'm not the Kurt level or the Steve level, but I'm at the ground level, and I'm understanding all this technology, and I'm diving in deep, getting my head wrapped around this stuff." And I said, "Hey, I can help where I can." And so I helped put this book together, but these guys did all the heavy lifting, I would say, bringing in all the content, and it was really fun and exciting to really work on this cutting edge stuff. And it's really exciting now to see it in the marketplace. And I have an apprentice working for me here in the shop, and he came up to me about 4 months ago and he said, "Hey, I wanted to tell you, our school is going to be using your book in our ADAS class." And I said, "Wow, that is really awesome. That was so cool to have that event actually happen." So thank you for bringing me on board, guys and gals.
Oh, that's awesome. Steve, is there anything you'd like to add as far as the development of the book while we're on this slide?
It was a lot of fun. I've been involved in it for a long time too on the OEM side. And when I started bringing it to the aftermarket with Kurt's help and so forth, it just was natural fit to have Kurt and Scott and I all working together. It was a lot of fun. It really was.
That's awesome. That's great. And Kurt, one of our attendees on their registration form asked about building an introduction to ADAS for their auto body program. And can you share a little bit about how your book applies across different transportation disciplines for our audience today?
Sure. Thanks for coming today, everybody. So when we originally started tossing this around, we all have a lot of varying backgrounds of how long we've been piddling around with these systems. And for me, I was literally writing a class. I had a class in the curriculum approval process, and the class was launching in the fall of 21. And as Erin had mentioned, we were all at that meeting together, and they were presenting some stuff. And Steve had mentioned, hey, he wants to develop this book. And I said, okay. I said, well, if I'm book shopping, here's the things I want to have in it, and kind of hand him an outline on literally a handwritten outline on a yellow legal pad that we'd kind of looked at with the other instructors, and said, "Here, read this on the airplane going home." The reality was I had already written the majority of the stuff. I used stuff Steve had developed previously and helped with, because I was teaching that class weeks later. And so it kind of evolved into needing a resource. And the reality is as we look at the industry today with ADAS, it is not just an automotive thing, it's a truck thing, it is a transportation thing, it's a collision thing. And in many cases, collisions maybe a couple steps ahead of automotive because they're being pushed much harder on that. So the foundational pieces in it apply across all those areas. But again, the bus fleets in a transportation agency and things like that, and really at an even greater distance, robotics and et cetera, using the visual systems, using radar systems and LiDAR systems. So it has a broad application. And the best thing is for students, once they have that foundation of how these systems work, the application gets a lot easier. So in answering the question of, how do I introduce it to an auto body program? If I'm in a school that has automotive and truck and collision, I'm building one class that will meet the needs for all of them. Build all those classes that foundation, but then start out with the conversation. And one of the other questions that we had seen in the list was, how do I introduce it to a high school class? And it's the same kind of thing. There's a lot of TV commercials we see today where they're not paying attention and the car slams on the brakes. ask the students, how did that happen? And get whatever feedback they've got. That gets them excitement. They've seen it and never really thought, how did it do that? And then that gives you that, oh, well, here's how brakes work. And you can start talking about the hydraulics, and you can start talking about assist. You can work your way into ABS and stability control. And guess what? We use those foundational automotive systems for ADAS to function. ADAS is really a sensor package and a software package utilizing existing framework, whether it's camera systems, steering systems, etc. And that gives you that jumping off point, that inclusion point. It can be embedded into existing classes, a brakes class, a steering and suspensions class, or it could be standalone. So it's very flexible, and people can use the book as they need be to meet those needs.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you all for that. That's great. Well, behind every great author team are reviewers who take time to review chapters and provide feedback throughout the process. There are 38 outstanding reviewers from transportation programs across the country in the front matter of this book, including many who are with us today who are highlighted above. And Scott, you mentioned your apprentice that you've worked with, and I think you had a couple stories about some of these reviewers as well. Do you want to share any stories from the reviewers side?
Sure. Yeah, there's a number of reviewers there that I've had the pleasure of interacting with over the years. So Mr. Dave Brown, he's not related to me, but we share the same last name, which is pretty awesome. Actually, my apprentice just finished that ADAS class with Mr. Brown. So my student, or my apprentice here, of course, he's been getting fully loaded up with a lot of ADAS calibration. So he's been doing a lot of ADAS stuff. So he's probably ahead of the curve in the classroom, but it was pretty awesome to be part of that. And I also serve on their advisory board at Citrus College as well. And then, and then the Steve Tomeroy at Rio Hondo, I've worked with him over the years. Actually, I did a class for them at their school on some ADAS perception systems. That's kind of what I like to teach. The stuff that Kurt was talking about, the sensor suites and how they work and what they look like on the inside. Those are the things that I engage with. And of course, Professor Nelson up there at Macomb. I've been to Macomb at an ACAT conference I remember many years ago, and he's a sharp individual, and it's been wonderful working with all these folks over the years.
And the interesting
That's
thing
great.
from
Thank
the
you.
feedback
go ahead.
Sorry. The most interesting thing that we got from the reviewers was just the need for the information. That, while there was pieces here and there and scattered all over the place, having it in one place that was easily accessible, came through in all their comments.
Absolutely. Good. Very good point. And then Aaron, is there anything you want to share from the acquisition side as far as any people today that are on the call that would want to participate as a reviewer or anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, thank you for that, Kathy. I'll just drop my email address in the chat. And if you're bummed that your name isn't on the screen, I have work for you too. So send me an email and say hello, or if there's an idea that you have or wondering if there's a product in the works, would love to hear from you. So thank you, Kathy.
Perfect. Okay, excellent. So you can see the ASE Education Foundation logo on the cover of this book, and that's because the content aligns to the ASE L4 ADAS Specialist Test. And to add more excellence to the author team, Scott was actually involved in the development of these standards. So I'm going to have Scott share a little bit more about the development of the standards and information, and then maybe Kurt can share some information on the accreditation and certification from the education side.
Yes, well, thank you for that. I remember, I think it's going back maybe 5 years ago that ASE started talking about this and said, hey, we want to develop a certification around it. And they asked me if I wanted to be part of it. And I said, oh, absolutely, I would be honored to be part of it. So over the years, we've had our meetings, and a lot of it it's awesome. Like Kurt was saying, it's organic. A lot of the subject matter is the stuff that I'm entrenched in day in and day out, and it's very interesting to see how that all these technology suites kind of blend together, because they're supporting active safety, right? Not just driver assistance. It's the active safety stuff is very important, and what's happening out there in the world is that there are statistics that are not being recorded now. So there's a lot of near misses that are, provided based off of this technology that's in the vehicle. But I got a chance to work with some really excellent folks over the years, creating this L4 accreditation, and it is a very thorough test. And if any of you instructors haven't signed up for it yet, I would encourage you to do it. But I understand, because this is an advanced test, of course, your students aren't going to be able to qualify for that because there's some other prerequisites. But a lot of the stuff that we're teaching in the book or providing in the book will definitely get them on the right track to get them equipped to not only gain this certification in the future, but also provide competent service in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And hopefully they're going to land in, my prediction, they're going to land in a job where most of the people in the service department is unaware of these technologies, and they're going to be positioned nicely to bring some very good resources to the team.
That's awesome. That's great. Kurt, do you want to share any information from the education side of the house as far as the accreditation and certifications?
Sure. It was kind of funny because, like I said, a lot of this was kind of built around before ASE had a formalized certification and such. So tasks that had already kind of been flushed out, what have you, when they did finally release all the requirements, we really didn't have to add anything. We had already pretty well met the stuff right from the get-go. So from the technician side, we knew the book was going to be very comprehensive and meet the needs for that. And on the education side, initially ASE really didn't have anything as an ADAS requirement for program certifications for their accreditation. They had, one little brief statement of essentially, that as students are referencing information and service materials, et cetera, that they should include vehicles equipped with ADAS. And that was the extent of ADAS in ASE, and currently even through I think it's the 2022 certifications for automotive. In 2023, the collision and truck certification requirements did change, and the truck one added something similar to that automotive statement of inclusion of ADAS equipped systems. But collision did make some substantial additions. They added, it was about 6 or 7 ADAS specific items of, component locations and removals and, information, repair procedures, things as critical as, when do you do a calibration and doing a calibration. So back to what I said earlier, having that crossover class, if you have these multiple disciplines, that crossover class is going to impact all of those in a positive way. So I would anticipate, I think this July, we'll see the automotive new standards come out as my expectation. And I kind of suspect they're going to be very, very similar to what you can see in the current 23 standards for collision. I would expect that you're going to be adding those things into the programs as well for that awareness at the very minimum, and preferably more practical application.
Okay, thank you for that. And then in their book, you can see on the screen, there's a number of support materials to really tie to those ASE standards and to prepare students to go forward. So there's end of chapter critical thinking ASE type questions to help learners prepare for that L4 certification. There's job sheets that we'll talk about soon that align to those tasks. There's an ASE certification practice test with an answer key for instructors. And then there's an ASE correlation guide in the instructor resources where you can see where the standards are and where the author team has covered that standard throughout their book. So hopefully that gives you some good resources to use for those of you that are teaching to the ASE standards.
And that's a good piece, that practice test. So that isn't just the homework questions and things like that. That test was built specifically as an ASE practice test. So it actually does use the ASE composite vehicle handout as part of that exam. So you're referencing the information in that composite vehicle handout, the wiring diagrams, the layout for targets, as if you were taking that L4 exam. So it's
That's
a great
awesome.
practice test for faculty especially, but
Mm-hmm.
that's my final exam for my classes.
Oh, that's great advice. Really good, Kurt. Thank you. So this is the brief table of contents that shows the coverage of the key topics related to ADAS. And the authors have referenced a number of these chapters as they are providing answers to some of the questions that you all put in your registration form. Kurt, I think you mentioned earlier about one of our attendees who asked for an overview of what you think would make a good introduction to ADAS for high school students. I think in your notes to me, you referenced chapter 5. With the fundamental vehicle systems. Is there anything else you want to add for our high school instructors or even introductory college instructors related to that?
Yeah, I think it's a critical piece. We really have to look at where the automotive industry was and is. There's still a lot of us out there that, been in it for a while and maybe still teaching to the comfort level. But our comfort level is not what the student's career, current and future will be. So we really have to sit down and really evaluate what we teach in classes. What are those new fundamentals? Do we need to spend days and weeks on a mechanical steering box? Or should we be making that an awareness and then spending more time in a rack and pinion and evolving that into an electric steering? And oh, by the way, we now have drive-by-wire steering. So these kind of things, we've got to evolve it. So as we go through these different classes, kind of like the example I gave earlier with brakes, we can give that introduction piece at any class. It's applicable to all of them, but especially in an intro class, because some of what gets the younger generations excited is the technology connection. How is that Tesla doing hands-free, or that I see these vehicles running around in San Francisco with no drivers, or whatever the case may be. And if we can tie that into, here's the basic vehicle systems, here's how ADAS is leveraging those vehicle systems to do these extra functions. And, those are those foundation pieces as we move more and more semi-autonomous and fully autonomous, that works. And understanding that, the car, whether it has ADAS or if it's fully autonomous, it still has brakes, it still has steering, it still has suspension. A lot of the same kind of comments we make with electric vehicles. 80% of it's the same thing it was before. Same here. And for me in my classes, that's how I try to introduce things. I don't have to give them days and weeks of lecture on depth in an intro class. I can give them 5 or 10 minutes of a topic as it's applicable. And then across this semester, if I've added a couple of hours that bring out some ADAS specific things, knowing that they're going to get a little bit more down the line, that they're ahead of the game. They've got the language, they've got some excitement, and we just keep building that as we go through.
Very good. And that excitement is an important piece to keep kids in the program and keep them interested in the automotive trade. So that's really great. And then Steve, another one of our attendees was asking specifically about whether it's absolutely necessary to perform an ADAS recalibration. And also, is it necessary to perform ADAS calibration for a simple alignment check after replacing tires? I know that's a specific question, but I know we have chapter 11 on calibration. Is there anything, Steve, you'd like to add to our attendee who asked about the calibration topics?
When I first began working with these systems and working with the OEMs such as Toyota, Honda, Lexus, and Safelite, there was no guidelines for that. But as we got further into detail, more time, many committees were formed, like SECA, for example, that governs the body shops, and Toyota. They all added that whenever you do any repairs to the front end or front end alignment, you've got to do a calibration. And SECA, which is now on page 37 of our book under the deep dive section, talks about how they want you to do a calibration after any repair to the body work. That's SECA governs the body shops, any body shop that may come under the insurance plans. And all the insurance companies that I worked with, because I trained all of them as well, throughout North America, both Canada and the United States, they're demanding that too. If you do a repair to the vehicle that may affect the camera, the radar, otherwise you should do a calibration. And in fact, they actually demand it on Toyota.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, one more thing. Yeah, one more
Yes,
thing.
I was just going to ask you for one more thing.
Yeah. So, I I'm in the service information all the time and looking around, and you can see some statements. One statement from Toyota in the calibration, when you're going to do the calibration for a camera, it talks about why you're here. And it says raise the accuracy of the camera because there's always going to be some kind of error or some element of error. But also think about any changes to the vehicle over time. Basically, the ride height, the trim height basically changes. And so when you're doing a new calibration to the car, you're truing it up, right? You're raising that accuracy, just like it says right in that scan tool. I'm sure that was authored by some engineer out there. So, you are raising that awareness. You're also looking at data metrics. And in the book, we talk about that, collecting your data metrics before you do an adjustment, data metrics after, so you can see the delta there so that you know that you're landing where it needs to be. And I've used that data also to help us diagnose. And I think we've got some case studies in the booklet that talk about that as well. But a lot of really good stuff here.
And something else
Excellent.
to build on that a little bit is sometimes people don't realize the work they've done may have an indirect impact. If they've done, a tire and wheel change, you've changed ride height. If they've done a suspension, if they've replaced shocks and springs, you've changed their ride height.
Right.
If they've pulled an engine that required them to pull the front bumper apart, well, there's a good possibility you've moved a front radar. So sometimes those jobs that are included steps in a bigger process may require you to backtrack through and also do a calibration. Even though the engine R&R may not say do a calibration, you've got to realize what other things you did as prerequisite steps. And that brings a big part on back to, how do we bring it into a class? One of the very first things that anybody can do to help students start to be aware of it is have a car. If they have a car in their fleet, if they don't have a car in their fleet, go out in the parking lot and go for a walk. And hey, what cars have bumper sensors? What cars have cameras? What cars have radars that are visible, to where they learn to visualize those things and rapidly pick them up, and then go, oh, wait a minute, I've got to take that front grille out and the radar is connected to that. I better make sure I'm also upselling the calibration and such. And especially for an alignment class, that's even more important.
Great. Thank you. So on the registration forms, we had a number of questions asking about facility requirements, equipment, tools, shop space as part of developing an ADAS program at these schools. Scott, do you want to start out and comment on anything? We pulled up chapter 9 and 10 with some of the content here that you cover in those, but anything you want to add?
I think we've got a pretty comprehensive list in the booklet there, because this is an unknown, right? A lot of people that haven't seen any of these calibrations take place, they want to know how much space. Well, depends on the type of calibration you're doing. For most camera and radar calibration stuff, you don't need a ton of space, but you do need some clean space. Clean meaning there's no highly reflective components, metallic components, because of how the radar systems work. But we do cover a lot of that here. But when you really need a lot of space, it's typically when you're doing that around camera stuff or around view. You've got to lay out these big maps. Some manufacturers have some pretty complex routines, and then you look at another manufacturer and they got a pretty simple one where you just drive through a parking lot that's got a lot of stripes on it. So, but a lot of that is all covered pretty well in these chapters.
And a lot of that's based on Steve's work. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to add the fact that, when you do radar, you can, if you are limited on space, sometimes you can shift the car to the left side left side of your bay to do some of the calibration on the right side and back and forth. There are some cars you're not going to be able to do in a regular bay size. Just need to either extend it out or something. But you also have to make sure your shop floors are level, that you compensate for where the drainage is, and that's in the book. We tell you all that. I think Scott did a video on that too, didn't you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think we're going to talk about the videos, but yeah, we've got a number of videos that walk you through a lot of these elements.
Calibration as a whole isn't that difficult. It's really follow the directions, follow the steps very precisely. Right. The trouble is when it doesn't calibrate. You don't get something that tells you, oh, this is wrong. It just says calibration not complete or calibration failed.
Right.
And, right there in the title of chapter 10, facility and environmental requirements. That environmental plays a huge part. Depending on the layout of your shop, if the sun comes in the window the wrong way at the wrong time of the day and you're trying to calibrate, you may never calibrate. You wait to a different time of the day and it goes just fine. So reflective surfaces, the lighting, same thing if you're doing a dynamic calibration where you're driving the car. If you're in the Northeast and the roads are covered with snow, it's not going to see the lines. It's not going to calibrate anytime soon. So all of those kind of things come up in the applicable places throughout the book.
Yeah, and one more thing to add there. Some people may think, well, why does the lighting have to be specific in the shop when the car is just out in the wild, right, in operation? Well, one of the things that I discovered in using a lot of the camera systems that I've been using, building these little neural network boxes, is that the cameras, when they go into calibration mode, they are typically applying specific filters, highly sensitive filters, looking for edge detection. This is why we see a lot of these black and white high contrast targets. And when you have light, you look at it with your eye and it looks okay, but the camera sees a little bit differently. And we talk a lot about that in the book because that is where the trouble is, right? So normally a calibration process, if you know what to expect, you know it's going to typically take you 20 minutes to complete that process. And when it fails, then you're going, what happened? And sometimes all you got to do is drop the door down, remove some of that extra light, maybe turn off a bank of lights up above, and then you're on to success. But that's one of the bigger challenges that we've had in the shop with calibration when things don't work. And then you got to start thinking like that engineer, thinking like that packaged sensor, and how does it actually work during this process?
Awesome. Thank you. Developing those troubleshooting skills. So this is just an example of a chapter, and every chapter follows a consistent framework with chapter openers that include learning outcomes that you see there, technical terms, and an introduction. And you'll find some great images and special features throughout all the chapters that we're going to review here in the next couple of slides. But I just wanted to give you a visual of how the chapters start out for you. And then Scott, I know I want you to talk about some of the case studies, and you talked about how important it is for students to be informed about these and to have some relevant examples throughout the book. Do you want to share some insight?
Yes, of course. Case studies are awesome because you get to learn through the experience of others. And these are things that kind of fall outside of the normal framework of failures, right? So there's a lot of weird stuff that can happen out in the real world. But we've got a number of case studies that I've actually worked with some of the technicians that brought these case studies, or we were able to bring those in and got to experience some of these things. And I saw the challenges that were going on behind the scenes. They were spending a lot of time trying to solve a problem where the car would not calibrate. And we walked them through the specifics around what was causing the issue, what caused the damage, why it was damaged. And one of them I can recall is the BMW that had something hit the radar sensor up in the front and the bumper. So they had to do a little bit of bumper repair, but the radar sensor looked fully intact. But they spent hours trying to get it to calibrate, and it wouldn't calibrate. And they finally got permission to put a $4,000 radar sensor on it, and it calibrated right away. And so the technician, or one of the technicians that I know, he took it apart, and we've got pictures in the book, and you can see the percussion. It had such a hard hit that the plastic was not inhibited at all, but the percussion on the inside caused enough deflection in that board that I'm sure it broke a couple circuits. And these wafer boards are super thin, and the circuits are just hairline. So, these are things that really will lend themselves well for technicians and even estimators in the field, because there may be cases where car shows up, you're going to be doing a calibration, and you see that car's had some kind of a collision up in the front, and it has the original sensor on it. Most of the manufacturers say if there's any damage in the front of this car, it's taken a hit, or it's equal dropping that sensor, it needs to be replaced. And if you're armed with that knowledge and you can talk to that insurance adjuster, you've just smoothed out that whole process and gotten the vehicle back on the road with the least amount of friction.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. And then two important features in the text are also pro tips and deep dives, and you'll find those throughout the different chapters. Scott, I'm going to have you share a little bit more about the pro tips, and then Steve can share about the deep dives.
Yeah, so a lot of the pro tips, these are just learning opportunity moments. I know I was looking through the book this morning, and I think Kurt just brought it up. Have the students walk through the parking lot and start looking at these cars. You can quickly look at a car and do an assessment on what type of equipment's in that vehicle. And I up in my front office here, I routinely grab my front office staff and I have them walk out in the parking lot and show them, try to get them up to speed, and we still have deficiencies in that space. So these are all good practice and real world pro tips to leverage and bring that knowledge and experience up where it needs to be.
Awesome. And Steve, how about the deep dives? What can you share about those?
Well, the deep dive is for the student who needs to know a deeper understanding of why. For example, deep dive provides a discussion of the subject that may be foreign to that student. For example, deep dive, we tell them what a photon is, or even deeper than that, we'll tell them what the voltages of individual light colors are. But the neat part is we can give them additional information about OSHA standards. And as Scott said to me yesterday, deep dive is what would take a technician that may one day want to be an engineer. He's now getting a start right here in that deep dive. He's learned something he never knew before.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then we want to talk about the end of chapter content that includes the summary, there's critical thinking questions, and those ASE type questions that we talked about earlier, and then a hands-on ADAS that tie the content to the job sheets. So Kurt, can you tell us a little bit more about the end of chapter content and how it could benefit students and instructors?
Sure. So we wanted to make sure that we could check off both boxes. For the faculty that like to to abuse themselves and have to do a lot of reading. You have the typical short answer type questions and such, which really gets the students the chance to put in their words. Do they understand it and can they convey it in their words? But then the reality is we're an industry that is going with a certification standard with ASE. So we want to prep them whenever possible with those ASE style questions. There are, I think, 10 or 15 ASE questions in every chapter, along with about, I think it's 4 or 5 of the critical thinking commonly. And then again, there is a test bank that associates to every chapter, so people could custom build their tests if they wanted to. And then, as we mentioned earlier, there is essentially like an ASE test prep for the L4 that utilizes the composite vehicle that they can use. And with the hands-on side, the different job tasks are really meant to be generic in nature, and we're going to talk about those a little bit more in a couple of slides.
Perfect. Thank you. And then we talked about the job sheets, the hands-on aspect of teaching the ADAS technology. And I know that a lot of the instructors on the call today had asked about the hands-on side of teaching ADAS. Scott, anything you want to share about the job sheets?
Yeah, I mean, these are good frameworks for getting somebody established or get their head wrapped around what all is involved with a particular system or where the component's at, what to do with that component. I mentioned earlier about the dropping of a sensor. It says right on there, do not drop. Well, if you're going to remove it, you're going to need to be careful and place that in a appropriate storage location. I can only imagine out there in the world how cars are disassembled and things are thrown on benches, and then we just introduced a problem. So visual inspections, pre-calibration checks, there's a lot of stuff here that we've added that go above and beyond what you typically are required to do in the if you're following the standard service information. In fact, sometimes collecting data before you even begin calibration process so that you know what those numbers were before. A lot of times that's not a step in the service manual. Other manufacturers, you may end up doing a calibration and it actually collected the data before, the data after, and it produces a nice report for you. But having that awareness of how these systems are set up and walking through these checklists will definitely get you on the right step.
And
Awesome.
the job sheets are in actually two different places. Not only are they in the resources area, but they're actually in the text itself.
Mm-hmm.
So they can always reference them or even do the tear out thing if they needed to. So they're available in multiple places for them.
Exactly. Very good. And Kurt, when I talked to you yesterday, you had talked about the flexibility specifically with this one, with the component R&R and the flexibility to be able to use it at different points in the course. I don't know if you want to share that story. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So, we could have very well, written a component R&R for a radar and for a camera and for specific components. But depending on what vehicles you have in your fleet and availability of things, we wrote them in a generic manner. So it doesn't matter what vehicle you have. It doesn't matter what information systems you have. It doesn't matter what scan tools you might have. And on a per student or per group basis, you can say, okay, your group is doing the front radar, your group is doing a side, your group's doing a front camera, whatever. And it uses the same sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And that way they're doing the checkoffs and answering what's applicable to what they're doing on that assignment that day. But hey, their next lab day, they could get that exact same sheet, but a new component and even on a different vehicle. And when you take a quick peek with what we have on the screen here, it's doing all those pieces to where, hey, they've got to go in, they've got to reference some information. They've got to find out, is the vehicle got that feature? What is its purpose? How does it work? Goes into what kind of shop information systems are you using? Are you using third party? Are you using OEM? How do you remove it? What are the steps in removing it? Did you have to take other things apart? Do you have to calibrate it after you've done a removal with it? We also bring them into the wiring diagrams, because the reality is with ADAS, when it comes to the component level items, you check power, you check ground, and you're checking a bus signal. And that's really it. If you have those three things, you either have a software issue or you've got a hardware issue. You're not having to drill down much beyond that. So being able to utilize a diagram effectively, identify the connector location, the terminal, the wire color, what signal should I see there, and be able to bring that in, because now this example in using it in component R&R sets them up for using that similar information when they get into a diagnostics or when they get into obtaining a bus signal and things like that. So they're really meant to be kind of all encompassing within themselves and then flexible across whatever application.
Awesome. And as Kurt mentioned, that two different ways to find them. The one you have on the screen now is a docx file that can be printed for your students, especially if they're going to be reusing the same job sheet. They're available for you in the instructor resources. And then on this next slide, it shows you another job sheet that looks the way it would look in the book itself for students to be able to fill right in within the text. And then the digital companion is one of the resources that you might find very handy for your students to use. It includes e-flashcards, matching activities, and vocabularies that can be used as often as needed and provide instant results for students. So if they'd like to check their comprehension of terms, they're able to utilize these on their phones, on their tablets, on their laptops. They're pretty flexible and pretty simple for them to use. From the ebook, if you can see the red circle on the left side of your screen of technical terms, that links students right to all of these activities. You can project them in class and do it as a group. You can have students just do it on their own. But I thought that these digital companion assets tied a bit to the question we received about those introductory high school or college level courses. And some of our attendees mentioned that their students come into their course with not too much knowledge yet that they've gained up until now. So I think some of these basics that they can study, it might be helpful in those situations. Kurt, is there anything else you'd like to say about these?
Yeah, I think for for the instructors just to be aware that this is, that digital add-on piece that's above and beyond the textbook. So your students, I find a lot of my students in the college don't typically do the add-on piece, but that doesn't mean you still can't use it. It's still in your instructor resources area. And these could be warm-up questions at the beginning of class as some of the people are still trickling in and they're starting to figure out what day it is. You can throw some of this stuff up there and gamify it a little bit and still be exposing them to it, just in a different manner. We all know that with our different learning types, sometimes just making a game of something can help. Years ago in a program I was teaching, we took a soccer ball and we wrote acronyms on the little hexagons on the soccer ball, and we throw it at the student. The ones that were awake caught the ball, and wherever their right thumb was, they had to tell us what that acronym was. The ones that didn't catch the ball, well, they got woke up. But just a different way of learning to get them going in the morning and things like that. So this gives another tool. And if they do buy the digital piece, hey, it gives them that repetition at home.
Exactly. And then we also have a new virtual toolbox that's available with the new ADAS program through the digital side of things. And here's a couple examples. And these were really designed for students that needed a little bit of help with tool identification. And there's 3 categories throughout the flashcards. There's general hand tools, there's general shop equipment, and there's the ADAS tools. So again, it's just the repetition piece and being able to do, not just show words and definitions, but to actually have the images to help students see the tools and the equipment and be able to really gain that knowledge and gain the comprehension of the shop talk that they're going to need once they're in the industry as well. And then finally, with the online instructor resources, there's an image library. And I'm excited about this just because as you flip through this book of theirs, there's so many very cool images and a lot that you can then take from the image library to use if you're creating PowerPoints or flyers or want to project an image in class. Kurt, you mentioned you use these in your teaching. You want to talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah, generally I hate publisher PowerPoints. They tend to be too wordy. They might have a picture every 4 or 5 slides. So that was one thing I kind of argued for is, well, we don't want really wordy presentations and stuff, and they're better than most. But a lot of the time I'll take the graphic and I'll customize, whether it's the existing PowerPoint that you can pull down from the instructor resources that you can modify, or the one that you can just kind of stream through. But sometimes I'll just build my own standalone one, and being able to get to the graphics that are in the book is a real good tie-in because they're seeing it in the book, they're seeing it on the board, and every now and then you get those students say, well, I spent X amount of dollars for this book and I didn't even use it. Well, they did other reading, they did their homework, but the pictures on your presentation were different. So inclusion of those same pictures can go a long ways with that too. And a lot of the graphics flat out didn't exist. There's a lot of graphics in there that Scott's done, that I've done, that Steve's done. Sourcing graphics was a challenge. There was a lot of things that were made by Goodheart-Willcox's art team and things like that based on, really bad drawings that we gave them to make them exist because some things just aren't out there.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And then you can bring Scott Brown right into your classroom through a number of ADAS videos included in your resources. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to play one here. And then Scott, I'll let you tell us a little bit more about these videos. They are fantastic. And I've watched a couple myself, and what a great extra tool that instructors can share with their students. I'll see if we can.
Calibrating the Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, or ADAS, of modern vehicles is essential to ensure optimal safety and performance. The time lapse behind me is a recording of this process from start to finish. We will walk through this entire calibration process slowly, breaking down the important steps.
That does respond directly to some of the questions we got. Some of the faculty, they've got the equipment. We saw questions like, I don't know how to set it up. I don't know how to use it. So both in the text and in Scott's videos, there's literally step-by-step guides in how to do it, as well as in the equipment itself. You know, when you buy an Autel or a Bosch or brand or whatever, there's multiples now, that the scan tool itself really walks you through this step by step. So if you follow directions well, you can do pretty good. But Scott's stuff really gives them that chance as an introduction. You could play that in the classroom in that controlled environment. You've been talking about it. You can show the video. Now you can go out in the lab and do it. Adds to that repetition.
Exactly. Thank you. Scott, anything else you want to add about the videos?
Yeah, well, thank you. I hope you learned something when you watched this. So if I need to have a calibration done, I can have you come and do it for me, Kathy.
Yeah, I'm an expert now.
Yeah, the video, you know, the videos were pretty awesome. I mean, I love doing video type work. You know, I'm a visual kind of guy. I do a lot of photography, videography, and do a lot of writing. And yeah, these were, you know, we worked with the team at GW, coming up with the right, you know, the right layout, the right data, and then they said, here, go ahead and let's make these videos. And so I put these things together, and so we've got a number of, you know, current, modern, totally applicable videos that will help students, you know, expand their awareness on ADAS. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then a number of attendees asked about integrating ADAS into their course curriculum where class hours are not increased. So to try to fit ADAS in without it being maybe a standalone course. And Kurt, you provided this great alignment chart to get us started on the conversation and to help with that integration. Do you want to share a little bit more about the information on the screen?
Sure. So yeah, there's really two ways to bring ADAS in. You could build a standalone class, and we know that takes time and effort and things like that, but you can bring information in tomorrow. You literally could bring in information tomorrow with a video and a brief discussion. So when we look through the book and we look through the content areas, we wanted to say, okay, what aligns with our typical ASE breakout classes? Because most of us teach at the college levels, we're teaching an A1 engines class, an A2 transmissions class, et cetera. So I started looking at them. And so in an engines class where you're already talking about cooling systems, as we get into these more advanced ADAS equipped vehicles, we're literally seeing liquid cooling. Scott mentioned yesterday, the gamers have liquid cooling in their PCs at home. Well, we've got liquid cooling in these ADAS control modules in some cars now because of the volume of information passing through them generating heat. If I'm teaching a brakes class, hey, that's a great opportunity to talk about the automatic emergency braking systems and the related subsystems within that. What pieces did the wheel speed sensors play in an ADAS application? A6 is an easy one. I mean, the buses, the programming aspects, voltages, displays, how cameras work, all those kind of things. So as you go through your different ASE specific classes, you can drop these pieces in and be able to control whatever depth you're able to go into at that time. And as you find savings in your evaluation of your course content, then you can expand those or contract those as you go. But areas like an A4 for suspension and steering, if you're teaching alignments, this isn't an option anymore. You know, for a long time, people weren't teaching the steering angle sensor calibration, and Hunter eventually embedded it in the machine. You didn't have a choice anymore. Well, think of ADAS that way too. If you're doing an alignment, you better make darn sure in the service information that manufacturer doesn't require a calibration, because if they do and you don't do it, you have a liability problem. If you need to do it and you didn't tell the customer, well, now you have an upsell problem because you're going to have to sell them that extra work to properly do the job. So knowing that ahead of time is really important to save a lot of grief on the backside. So this is a good way to drop in pieces right from the text into the classes that you're teaching.
Yeah, and I'd like to just
Awesome.
reinforce that part, Kurt. The selling or upselling the calibration after the alignment, that's like a no-no. And it just happened to us a little while ago on a Audi. An Audi has a camera and 2 radar sensors, one on each corner, and you know, we had to let the guy know, and he goes, yeah, that's why I called the dealer, and they said it was $700 for a wheel alignment. And he was getting one from us for under $200. So there was a reason why it's more expensive, right? So having that knowledge ahead of time is definitely very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. And then finally, Kurt, you had shared, I know some of our instructors were interested in kind of learning about a course outline and how to get started and putting it together. And you were nice enough to share your course outline at Chabot College. Do you want to talk about this at all, or
I would
share
just
any
mention real
insight?
quick. So if you look at the effective date, so community colleges in California, it's about a year from when we start to create a course, and by the time it goes through the college approval process and the state approval process, it's about a year. So realistically, this course started its development in 2020. We talked about that our original meetings about maybe thinking about a book were in the summer of 21. So I already had this on the books. It was already going to be taught. And for some people, if they've never seen a class, being able to see a course outline from another college kind of gives them an idea of what's included in it. So this is available, and I think they're going to share. I gave a link to our college uses CurricuNet as part of the course management stuff, to be able to go to it directly and be able to see the full thing, or they're giving it as a download. I'm not sure how they're going to connect it, but it can give you an idea what to see. And what I'd also recommend is, investigate other colleges, go and see if they have an ADAS class, especially a standalone if you're looking in that direction, and reach out to those faculty. Faculty in general are pretty good. They're going to share information, course outlines, lessons plans, and there are lesson plans for every chapter in the text. But even the high school programs, there's quite a few high schools that are starting to invest and bring in ADAS into their programs. In our area, we've got Mission Valley ROP in the Fremont, Newark, Union City area that has invested a lot in bringing ADAS in. And one of the people was on our review team as well in there. So they could give you an idea from a high school implementation of reaching out to fellow high schools and stuff, attending CAT conferences and NACATs and ASE conferences, and finding out, from the networking side, what are other people doing? There's some really fast ways. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can borrow it.
Exactly. It takes a village, right? Thank you. I'm just going to go over next steps, and then Aaron, if there's any additional questions and people want to stay on to hear that, we can, but I want to make sure people know. And Kurt, you gave me a great segue, because some of the next steps for our attendees today is we'll be providing you with samples, the ASE alignment grid for integrating the ADAS content into your courses that Kurt showed you, based on your current courses. Also, that sample course outline that Kurt just showed us, we'll be able to share that with you to hopefully inspire you as you're building your courses. And then the authors have been nice enough to include full answers to the questions you submitted in your registration form. So if there's anything specific that we might not have covered today, we'll be sending you a document with a lot of those answers from the authors so that you can continue the learning process and learning more and getting answers to those questions. Also, you all have a GW educational consultant at your disposal that then they are super happy to help you with anything you might need. They could even do an online demo of all the resources that we reviewed today with you. Please reach out to them anytime. They're very helpful and knowledgeable, and can provide anything you need. You can certainly reach out to Aaron or me anytime too. I've included our emails on this screen, and especially again, if you're interested in reviewing or talking to Aaron about content, she's a great source of information for you. Speaking of Aaron, are there any other questions that came in during the webinar?
No, just everyone wants Kurt's outline and obviously access to the materials. And I don't know about you all webinar attendees, but as they were developing this book, it was just so fun to listen to them speak about all the technology and all that they're experiencing or that they're hearing about what's going on in industry. So, Scott, Kurt, and Steve continue to share that with your networks and broadly on LinkedIn, because we all learn a lot when you do so. So thank you.
Thanks.
Yes. Yes, well, I want to thank everybody for attending today. I know it's a busy time of year, and we really appreciate your time. And I so appreciate Steve and Kurt and Scott and Aaron joining in today and sharing their expertise and knowledge with all of us. I'm not going to do any calibration, Scott, to answer your earlier question. I'm not ready, but I did enjoy your videos. But anyway, I want to give the authors the final words. Scott, we'll start with you if you'd like to say some final words to our audience, and we'll go around the loop and call it a day.
Yeah. So yeah, again, thank you for attending. This has been an honor to be part of this. What's really interesting is that the technology is continuing to evolve, and so there are some interesting advancements taking place where some manufacturers now have been able to kind of leapfrog and eliminate certain hardware in lieu of other hardware that has basically taken some major leaps in technology, which is amazing. But these are the things that the technicians are going to need to be aware of, and how they're being integrated and how they're supporting the car, because we want to be able to return that vehicle back to service, just like the aircraft industry. And I think there was an aircraft question in there, and I'm a pilot myself, and I pay attention to a lot of this stuff, and yeah, this definitely parallels that. And you need to be able to return that vehicle back into service the way it was equipped from the factory, and not left in any deficient state, because that consumer, even though they may say, oh, I don't even use the whatever system, that system's still active and it's doing other stuff, and it's going to help them avoid a challenge down the road. So this stuff is very, very important, and I'm so pleased to be part of it. And I love I love this technology, because it just it fuels my fire. So thank you again for bringing me onto the call today, Kathy and Aaron and my co-authors there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Steve, I'll let you go next if you'd like to have some
Sure.
final
First, I
thoughts.
want to thank both Kurt and Scott for everything they did together. It's a great pleasure to work with two smart minds like that. We had a good time. The most important thing, if you've never driven a vehicle that has ADAS, go rent a car, drive it. Just see what Scott just said. That system's active whether you turn it on or you turn it off. If you don't turn the cruise control on, it's still trying to control some of the braking. Keep that in mind. It's always advancing. Every 6 months or something new that's coming out. And having retired from Bosch, I could tell you I saw it all from the OEM side. It was continuously evolving since 2005, and it's been there for a while. The other thing I would like to say to everybody is that calibration is important. It's not something you can take lightly. You don't just take a tape measure and lay it on the floor. You really have to be accurate. You have to follow all the instructions, just as it says in the scan tool. The scan tool guides you straight through every step. Read each screen carefully. I can tell you, I've calibrated a lot of cars, and sometimes I didn't read the screen properly and it didn't calibrate. And we had to rewrite that software. Scott did that too. Hey, Scott, nice to know you. The interesting part was that I traveled all over the North America and parts of Europe, doing the training on this stuff. And, if people just don't want to pay attention, now they have to. Every car is equipped. I think it's in 2027. Is that right, Scott and Kurt? That it will be mandatory. You won't be able to turn the systems off on all new cars. So with that, go have some fun. It's a lot of fun. I can tell you that. It is a lot of fun.
Kurt, you're up.
Yeah, I just want to echo what everybody said so far. I appreciate the chance to share this. Originally the whole idea was really kind of a personal need. I needed it for my classes. I didn't care if we did a book or not. I needed the material for my classes. And, it's kind of taken on a life of its own, and being able to work with Steve and Scott and Gina and Aaron and everybody that we've worked with at GW, for them, a lot of the time, it was kind of like herding cats, because the three of us would get talking about something. And literally yesterday in our pre-webinar meeting, we finished up with, hey, here's these 4 or 5 new things that we've both all recently seen. So we're already looking at, what content comes in for, the revision in a couple of years. But yeah, the technology side, like Steve said, if you haven't driven these systems, drive them. Get the experience of what it's like. I got really lucky. I had Tesla came into one of my hybrid classes the other day. They brought cars, and they actually let students go drive cars. and firsthand experience for them in an EV situation, and feeling regenerative braking, and feeling lane departure corrections and things like that. That is huge. That's absolutely huge. So for an instructor to gain that is really important. For the content itself, there's some difficulties in it, but it's not that hard. If you understand an automatic transmission and computer controls and a modern engine, you can learn ADAS and be able to apply it and do it effectively. But get training on how these systems work and how the cameras work and the radar works, because when you understand how they work, that makes a big impact on your diagnostic capabilities. But more importantly, use hands-on classes. There's not a lot of hands-on classes doing ADAS. Find those hands-on classes, get on the airplane, whatever it takes, and physically go do this. Move the targets, find out what it takes, what little differences it makes, because that's how you're going to know. Because trust me, it's going to go bad in your class. Somebody's going to put in the wrong number, and you're going to have to step back and scratch your head and go, okay, let's start over and go through the steps again. And even then you might not figure it out, and the next day you do it and it works fine because the sun's in a different place. So that hands-on is super critical to ADAS from the calibration side especially.